I think that's when the light bulb came off of like, hey, as we grow this thing, not only can we make money and have a successful company, but we can actually have a higher purpose here. Well, there's thousands of competitors. And I think for anyone trying to build a business, you have to be brutally honest with yourself on what is your actual value proposition. If you're very good at digital advertising and you kind of know the tactics of direct to consumer business, you could probably build a pretty good business and forego a lot of that. Now, it'd be very transactional. You'd be getting people to click because they like the product. But I think you probably plateau at some point through that approach because, as you know, it's so much more difficult to win on Meta right now than it used to be.
Welcome to the DTC Insider podcast, where online business owners come to find actionable tips and tactics to grow their businesses. Now, here's your host, Brian Roisentul.
Hey, welcome to another episode. I'm Brian Roisentul, your host, and I'm super excited to have Bear Handlon here with me. He's a co-founder and CEO of Born Primitive, a brand that started a decade ago, that's a long time ago, with compression shorts for weightlifters and has since evolved into a 9-figure brand, Bootstrapped powerhouse. From serving in the military to serving millions of customers, Bear has built a brand rooted in authenticity, performance, and purpose. With milestones like hitting 100 million in sales, donating over $2 million to charity, and paying over $5 million in veterans' medical bills this Veterans Day, Bear's journey is a masterclass in resilience, innovation, and impact. Let's dive into the strategies and lessons that have powered this incredible growth and see what's next for 2025. Hey, Bear, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. So I want to get started by asking you a question that probably everyone in the audience is curious about. At least I am. Why is Born Primitive a 9-figure brand and most other brands aren't?
Oh man, that's a loaded question. I think for me, so we're in a very competitive space. Apparel is an absolute nightmare. Everyone wants to be in apparel. There's thousands of competitors. And I think for anyone trying to build a business, you have to be brutally honest with yourself on what is your actual value proposition. You know what I mean? Why are you different? Why would someone shop you versus someone else? Get very clear on what that is. For us, we were a little fortunate that, starting a brand 10 years ago, I think it probably was a little easier considering like it's so competitive now and like advertising on Meta like was still kind of like unknown. And so I think a lot of it, our success, I will acknowledge, is a little bit of just timing, but also, we have really leaned into the values of the brand since the beginning. And while that it wasn't as obvious for me in the beginning of like how important that was, it's very obvious to me now that that's our real value proposition to the customers, because anyone can buy, workout and lifestyle apparel, and we have all kinds of other apparel now. Why would someone actually want to shop you? Because I would consider having good quality apparel, in my eyes, is an applied task. Like it has to be good quality. You can't just have good quality apparel and you're going to build a 9-figure brand, because there's so much more that has to go into it. How you execute with digital advertising and your fulfillment and customer service, all these things go into that. But more importantly, what is the feeling associated with your brand, and why do people want to rep it versus another brand that has equal quality? For us, a lot of that has just been leaning into, the mentality of what it is to be born primitive. And that's kind of a gritty, no excuses, no victim mindset, kind of mentality towards life. And we're also have been big supporters of the military and first responder communities from the very beginning. And I was active duty for the first 8 years. So it was very authentic because it wasn't just a punchline for us. And we backed that with financial action too. So I think a lot of people wanted to rep our brand because of what we stood for, in addition to it being a good apparel. But I think it has to be more than that. So kind of a long-winded answer. And of course, we can get into way more kind of tactical details of how we got there. But I think if you had to zoom out to 30,000 feet, really leaning into what your true value proposition is as a company, and particularly those that are listening that are in a crowded space, like you have to be brutally honest of like, all right, how are we different than the guy next door? Like if we're the same, Are we way better at digital advertising? Maybe that's the case, right? Maybe you know how to deliver your brand to get in front of more people better. Okay, that could work. Everyone kind of has their strength, but you need to, from a brand perspective, kind of boil it down to what is the real value add there. And obviously for different categories of product, like I think brand is less important. Like if you're really solving like a unique need, and maybe it's a technology product or something like that, that's a little different. Like I don't think you really even have a brand at that point. Right. But for kind of, something like apparel, like there has to be a personality associated with it and a feeling associated with it. And you have to do things in your marketing to create that association, right? And I think we've done a pretty good job of that.
Yeah, man, I have a lot of questions already, but I remember placing my first Meta ads, well, back then Facebook ad in 2011, inconsistently, and then we created the agency in 2013. And of course, Meta back then was more of a money printing machine, so a decade ago, it was probably the good old days, pre-iOS 13, way pre-iOS 13, way before the algorithm changes in back in 2018, and many other things happened. But it's tough to stay, alive as a brand and to thrive as a brand because new players, arise all the time. Competition gets harder and harder, especially during COVID. So, of course, it's not easy to not only to bring a brand to life, but also to stay consistent with your values, with your brand, with everything after such a long time in an ever-changing world. So I wanted to ask you, in such a long journey, do you remember what was that time in which you said, we are building something huge here?
I'm not very good at kind of sitting back and smelling the roses at all on success. I'm always in it, and we're getting to that next ridge line. As soon as you get to a summit, it's a false summit. There's another one even higher. But I think probably during COVID, we did a pretty cool campaign where we donated half of our profits for 10 days as a way to support gyms who had been forced to be closed during the pandemic. And we ended up donating a little over $200,000 to gyms in a 10-day period who were participating in this campaign. And it went kind of viral. And I think that was the first time I realized we could really leverage our brand to do good. And I think that coincides with the success because that it's not an outrageous amount of money, but that's a substantial amount of money for a brand that still has 6 employees. Right. So in a 10-day period, whipping up a campaign in a half a day and deploying it the very next day and to get that kind of success where we had a couple thousand gyms enroll. And it was just a very cool thing. And we got so much good feedback. I think that's when the light bulb came off of like, hey, as we grow this thing, not only can we make money and have a successful company, but we can actually have a higher purpose here. And it's only continued to get better. You mentioned in my intro that we paid off $5 million of veteran medical bills just a couple of weeks ago. It actually was $11 million because we decided to more than double it. Wow. The initial pledge was $5 million. So that's what brings me joy and brings me purpose as the founder of this company, is that we can actually do things like that. And we can still run a very successful company at the same time. And here's the kind of, irony of all of it is by giving back and doing things like that, it actually can help your business substantially. I would be lying to you if I said by us doing that, it's not going to help us in the next couple of years, because think how many loyal customers we acquired by a genuinely good deed and act like that. Then the media picks it up and they're saying, hey, look at these guys. They're really trying to make a difference and be a force for good. And so it's incredibly self-serving because it brings me joy that we're able to help people like that. And I think, over 6,000 veterans are going to go into Christmas completely debt-free. One individual, his bill was $182,000. He was partially paralyzed, former Marine. And we got to tell him over the phone that, hey man, your debt is gone. You're off the hook, right? That's life-changing stuff. So that it brings me joy. But there's also an incredibly effective business tactic of that type of approach. And that makes you stand out from the noise, right? If there's 10,000 apparel companies in existence right now, well, people from that know what Born Primitive, who we are and what we stand for. But I think going back to right when COVID popped off, that was like, I think a light bulb moment for me of like, hey, there's something to this concept and this approach. And we've only built from then since then.
I think, this is interesting because it actually brings me back to something I posted, a few months ago about the e-commerce part making brands lazy. again, the e-commerce, the part of the online part, making brands lazy. Because if you had, let's say, a brick and mortar store, you probably hand out flyers. You could partner up with local stores. You wouldn't just sit and wait, hopefully, to get foot traffic and get people through the door, right? So in this case, e-commerce, sometimes they forget that it's not only about placing some or running some meta ads for Google Ads. It's more about connecting in real life with real people, connecting with communities. So based on not only with the clients we work at the agency, but the over 180 episodes we recorded with amazing companies such as yours, I think that probably I cannot help but identifying some common patterns. And in your case, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that part of your huge success is that you're not hiding between quotes behind an e-commerce storefront. You have ties in the community. You are a former Navy SEAL. You were in the CrossFit Games, so probably you have you built connections over time or your network in the CrossFit space. You have ties with gyms, with veterans. So you're everywhere, man. So probably that's something that it's more than the online storefront what you have built, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's a good point. I think if you're very good at digital advertising and, you kind of know the tactics of direct to consumer business, you could probably build a pretty good business and forego a lot of that. Now, it'd be very transactional. It'd be very product focused, of course. You'd be getting people to click because they like the product. But I think you probably plateau at some point through that approach because, as you know, it's so much more difficult to win on Meta right now than it used to be. Before iOS 14, a couple of years before that, you and I, we could start a t-shirt company right now, and in 3 months, it'd be $1 million business. I guarantee it, right? Because we know how to advertise, and what was CAC back then, $10, right? How easy is it to win in that landscape? But obviously those golden years are done, and I think there has to be more to the story than just product and fancy meta ads. There's only so many ways you can do a meta ad, right? You're still going to be paying a good amount in your customer acquisition cost, and you need them coming back. So they have to have positive experience with the product. But, I think where you really get LTV is when there's an emotional attachment because it represents something more to the customer than just the product. The logo actually stands for something.
So yeah, for sure, of course. So you were a Navy SEAL officer, right? So
correct.
How did that shape you as an entrepreneur?
Well, I was definitely an entrepreneur before, I went into the Navy. I grew up like with a lawn mowing business when I was really young, and it grew into something fairly substantial. I was always a bit of a hustler. Like, I think entrepreneurs, we kind of just have that itch, right? Like we're always going to be like that. But I think I just learned a lot in the SEAL teams about leadership and, the unique component of the SEAL teams, and it's not exclusive to SEAL teams, but everyone has a different role to play, like in a platoon, right? And you need everyone to do their job to be able to complete the mission and get to that end state of what you're trying to achieve. And I think the same is true with running a mainly D2C business, right? All the things need to align. So for us, of course, our ad account needs to be, going well, but that needs to integrate with our supply chain and our demand planning. So if we know we're going to be running a bunch of evergreen and prospecting campaigns on a certain product category, well, supply chain needs to make sure they forecast appropriately to give us a long enough runway to run those ads. If we spend 20 grand on content that we expect these evergreen ads to run for 3 or 4 months, but we run out in 2 weeks because we didn't demand plan right. Well, it's like, the system breaks down, and then, email, SMS, customer service needs to be, have a good positive experience so people come back. And, all these things, end up being, instrumental in the overall success. And I look at it as just a giant math formula. You know what I mean? And if the equation is in your favor, as long as you feed the funnel and get people in, you're going to continue to build that base of customers. But if things start to erode, maybe if quality starts to erode, so now your LTV is going to go down and your return rate goes up, and these little tweaks in the negative direction, that math problem starts being less in your favor. And at some point that will produce, a deficit in your business. So I think there's a lot of similarities there, particularly because a lot of those jobs are so different. Like our supply chain management is so much different than our email and SMS strategy. So that's kind of how I look at it. And making sure as the person running the team, everyone is very clear on the overall strategy, right? Because I think that's important. So they know the why behind their actions. And maybe they don't need to be an expert in supply chain, but I want the SMS person to know when they send out that restock text at noon and we sell 500 units in the first 2 hours, how that impacts, supply chain and vice versa, right? So long-winded, but I think there's a lot of similarities.
So I'm curious to ask you, I don't know if now or later, but probably I'll go with it now. What does a day in your life look like, at your company? Like, you're the CEO of a 9-figure brand. Not everyone has the fortune of being in your shoes. So they are probably, people listening or watching this, why not, are probably starting a brand, or probably they're doing 7 figures, or why not some, 8 figures. So what do you pay attention to when you are at 9 figures, different than when you are at early stages, at the company?
Well, obviously, it's the problem sets evolve, right? As you get to different levels, and there's going to be future levels we unlock that we don't even know about yet, right? And I've talked to a lot of people that are ahead of us in this progression, and there's a whole new set of things that enter the equation as you unlock certain levels of sales. And I think the biggest thing is just that with managing personnel, I think that's that it can be, of course, your biggest asset, but it could also be your biggest headache, right? The more personalities you get in the building and the more departments you have, and, the more direct reports and then, layers of management, I think that can produce a lot of inefficiencies in an organization if it's not run correctly. Imagine these organizations that have 20,000 employees. You could probably remove 1,000 of them and no one would even notice, right? Because it's like, they likely have built a lot of inefficiencies because now so much process is required to run that machine. So I think that's the biggest thing, is just making sure you as you build out your teams, you're creating processes that don't create too much red tape and bureaucracy to get things done. And we're very loose on that. I mean, we are very agile, and if we spin up a concept, we can deploy it in a couple of days. Whereas like some of these big brands that we compete against, I kind of smirk a little bit, because I'm like, man, this would have taken them 4 months, because they would have had to go to this level of management and then get an approval, and then you got to send it to legal. And then brand has to take a look at it to make sure like the artwork and the fonts are right. And before I know it's been 4 months, it's not relevant anymore. Well, we're like, hey, there's no legal. Just come into my office and tell me, oh, we're doing a social giveaway. Like, we don't need some, you know what I mean? It's like, yeah, that's great. Let's do it. Go. And eventually, obviously, there probably will need to be more checks and balances on kind of that process. But we're a little bit deliberate in building it in a way where that's not like inherently required to get anything done. And so there's many things I could probably highlight, but to me, that's the one that stands out immediately. It's like, we have like 80 employees now. It's a whole lot different than when we had 6, right? And it can be a big time suck managing personalities if you don't do it right. Like I'm way less involved in those conversations now, but I remember at a point, probably when we had about 35 employees, that half of my day we were talking about employee issues, right? So it's like, that's half of my day I could have been building the business, and I'm worried about this person who's griping about that the other person said this, and then you're like kind of becoming the HR person. And eventually I had to say, all right, unless the building is burning down, don't tell me what that I don't care. Figure it out. Go talk to HR. We had just gotten an HR person, so I think we kind of figured that out. But those are things you can get roped into that you didn't kind of sign up for, and that's can be distracting from you growing your business and doing what you are good at as the CEO or the founder. So
yeah, I can totally understand. In a smaller scale, before the pandemic, I used to have an office like for 10 years, and whenever I walked into the office, it wasn't me, Brian, a professional anymore. It was Brian, the shrink, trying to to listen to everyone and to go to the meeting room all over, like over and over, for different personal reasons. For as you said, things happen when you have a team. I'm curious, how do you align the company values? Of course, I know you are big on, or I think you're big on aligning company values with people's values, but how do you make sure that holds with 80 people in your team?
Well, I think it's kind of cool, because we're to the point now where people are coming to work for us. They're going out of a way to want to work for us because of what we stand for, right? They say, hey, I like how that company rolls. I like the values they have. And we really haven't had any issues with someone saying, hey, I'm uncomfortable with you guys being super, like, we're very patriotic, right? So we're unapologetic of the American flag and in the founding values of our country and military, our first responders. So someone who isn't in alignment with that probably isn't going to want to work here anyway, because they know how we roll. I mean, I got an American flag on my arm. I got the Constitution written on my forearm. It's pretty obvious if I'm giving you an interview, like, all right, I kind of understand, this guy's values just by looking at the guy. Not to say that's a requirement, because I don't really care what someone's personal beliefs are, as long as they're a good employee. There's a place here for everyone, and we're a totally merit-based organization. And I've even said in meetings before, hey guys, like, I myself as the CEO project certain things on social, and we have a podcast where we do long form. Sometimes we talk about politics or this or that. And I said, I want you to know, despite my beliefs in the values of the brand, that has no bearing on your employment here. This is a free country, and you all are, so don't think you have to walk on eggshells around me and what you say in the break room or whatever. I love it. You know what I mean? And we should all have differing opinions on things. So while we've been very strong as a brand to be certainly as a brand, I've tried to, create that environment here that, hey, if you don't roll that way, that's fine. Now, however, I don't think we have that, because the people that want to come interview in here are like, oh, hey, I want to be a part of that team because that aligns with my values. So, and that's been pretty cool, because you can find that out in the first question in an interview. Why Born Primitive? And if they start saying, hey, I saw what you guys did on Veterans Day, that was awesome, and I saw what you did for the D-Day anniversary, and that was so cool. You helped the World War II veterans go back to Omaha Beach and blah, 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 blah. Okay. Well, now I know why they're interested in our company, and at least that checks the brand alignment box, even though it doesn't always need to be checked, in my opinion.
Okay. Can you be the face of the brand?
Yes.
Why did you choose to be the face of the brand?
I really wasn't for, the first 8 years since I was active duty in the SEAL teams, I couldn't. Now, it's not like I wasn't on social, but I was very vague about my service. I just said I was, on the website, it said like founded by an active duty military family. That's about as detailed as we would go with it. But once I got out, I realized, it can be helpful if there's, a quote face of the brand, because, who's going to do the media interviews? Who's going to do the podcasts? The values of the company are just my values portrayed through a brand, because I'm not creative enough to come up with an alternate personality, right? Like if I was going to start another company tomorrow, it probably would be the same values, because that's the only way I can be authentic in how we market, and because it's my beliefs, through brand. So that was kind of the obvious answer. Our other co-founder, Mallory, we're very much aligned on these things, but she didn't want to be kind of in the spotlight. She just said, that's your thing. You're great at it. Go do your thing. And I think there's a component to people, having a personal connection to a brand and kind of seeing like the behind the scenes of like the people running it. And I think it's been good for our company to do that. I don't think it's required, but I think if done right, I think is another element you could kind of add to your, I guess, marketing wheel of how to reach people.
Yeah, I recently heard a debate around, the faceless brands versus the, these, brands with it could be the face of the founder, or it could be somebody else. I interviewed here on the podcast both many times, and of course there are ups and downs, but I always say, unless you are really, really, really shy or really, really against it, I think it's more beneficial than anything else, because at the end of the day, if you think that what you do can benefit others, and especially, of course, your customers, then why not going out there and shout it out, in every direction possible, right? I know it requires, I don't know, how many hours a week do you probably block to recording content, or how do you manage that?
It's not too bad. We have our own podcast, so I'm the host of that, and my president is our co-host. So we usually record one episode a week. Sometimes we do a double. So it's not a huge commitment. And then I like to go on podcasts too. Obviously, like this one, I love to talk about, especially, I haven't done a lot of like direct consumer ones or like e-commerce ones lately. And I love dorking out about, SMS and email and meta ads. Like I can talk all day about that. So I do like to put myself out there, because it's an opportunity for just one more touch point for the brand. And also you can learn a lot by having these conversations. I'm going to learn something from talking with you as well. So it's not a huge bandwidth. I think I could even level it up more. Like I've had people recommend like, hey, you should have a full-time content person totally dedicated to just you, and be recording your marketing meetings and pulling snippets of that and like putting it on your page. I think I probably eventually will get to that. It's just not a huge priority, and I don't really like promoting myself like more than like, that would have to be a deliberate strategy of like, all right, this is, I want to get to 200,000 followers. So then my page becomes one of our marketing levers. You know what I mean? And I just don't have that desire at the moment, but a lot of people have urged me to do that of like, hey, you're missing huge opportunities because people want to see behind the curtain on when you guys are doing that shoe meeting and like you're, brainstorming the D-Day marketing plan and you're all in the room and you're throwing ideas around like that could make for good content for people that are trying to run their own brands and just want to see how other companies do it. So I've thought about it. Maybe we'll get there soon.
Yeah, some people do it with a dedicated person or not. I don't know. Midday Squares, Jake Carls and his siblings, they record themselves, in tough, moments and in happy moments too. Even dancing at the supermarket with some of the employees there is super fun to see them. And some people prefer not to do that. Some people like, companies like BattleBox. I interview here John Roman, its CEO, and they didn't want to be the face of the brands themselves. So they found, as a coincidence, loyal customer who was already recording content. They reached out and the relationship evolved to the point that now the long beard guy, Brandon, recording the BattleBox videos, the BattleBox games, the BattleBox YouTube channel, everything, he's a full-time creator now. They moved him and his family to the headquarters city and but it depends on each brand, but I think in your case, it's amazing how things played out. I wanted to ask you, about building a community. I know you're here, there, like you're everywhere. Have you thought about, or do you have? I didn't check, to be honest, but do you have a community? Community could be, of course, an email list in its simplest form. It could be a Facebook group, Slack, school. Do you have anything like that?
We have a pretty substantial email list and text. We haven't really done any of the other stuff. We have a company Slack channel, but not like an open Slack channel. I think there's probably some opportunities there that we haven't leaned into, but maybe I'm a bit old school. I think, acquiring an email address and especially a phone number from your site is critical. The quicker you can get that person on your list and not on Meta's is like, the ROI on sending out a text is crazy. So, that's kind of our main tactic right now that has worked really well for us. I mean, when we send a text out, and a lot of people can probably relate to this, like you see it within 5 minutes, like where you look at the site and like people are already checking out. It's very effective. And obviously for moments like Black Friday and stuff, you're building that list the entire year for that moment. And that's when you can really squeeze that sponge and get a lot out of it. So, probably not the most savvy on those other methods, but email and text have been very effective for us.
Yeah, just for what it's worth, some founders, some 8-figure, 9-figure brands as well, that have been here on the podcast. They spoke at length about their benefits of having a community. Of course, you need to say no to some things because you can't be everywhere really, but over time as a company evolves, as you said, probably sometimes it's time to be in touch with customers and non-customers as well. It's different and complementary to having email addresses and phone numbers, right? Because there you can, of course, ask them what they want to see next, doing polls, getting feedback, ideas, hanging out, or BattleBox, for example, this brand I mentioned before, they do the battle games, and they have a big community. They even have a TV show on Netflix. So you can do all kind of stuff when you have a community to rely on, not only an email list, which goes, it works through a separate lane, I would say. So I think, again, not mandatory, nothing is, but it's something that has helped many, Opbi, I don't know if you know the supplement brand Opbi, where the guys at Chew on This, Ronak Shah, Ash Melwani, they are big on events across the US, and the podcast they have, Chew on This, they interview top brands as well. So yeah, they do have a community with, I think, 100,000 people there, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it's not 100,000 emails. It's 100,000 people active in a community. Engaging
that's great.
You can get ambassadors, you can get affiliates, you can get people. Some brands, for example, use it to get product testers. So they have a reduced group of customers to which they give, products before mass releasing them, and they sell outdoor backpacks. So they get things like this pocket is too big or too small, this strap is too thin or too thick. So you can get a lot of benefits out of that community for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, yeah, I know you're excited about talking about Meta and all kind of stuff, so let's go there. Black Friday ended not so long ago, so I'm curious, the audience is curious, I'm sure, to know what does a nine-figure brand do, or how do they get ready for such a big event as Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and probably really Q4?
Yeah, a good question. I think the prep for Black Friday, in a way, starts January 1, right?
Yes.
You have to have a commitment to customer acquisition. And, we, use the analogy like you fill the sponge to then you finally squeeze it. And you have to have evergreen and prospecting campaigns going. That's the filling of the sponge. And they're paying full price. It's a high quality customer. Hopefully they have positive experience. So they're coming back. The LTV is good. And then when you have that kind of milestone moment at the end of the year, Black Friday, Cyber Monday, so many of those customers are going to convert during that moment. And, like we talked about, if they're on your list now, maybe you're a little less reliant on Meta. They're going to convert from the email or the text. But then kind of fast forwarding, a lot of people, I think, stop, they don't prospect a lot in October. We go crazy in October because that's like when you're really filling the sponge, because you know what I mean? The costs are going to start going up in November. So we get pretty aggressive in October to kind of fill that up. That also could be a great time to run some giveaways with partners to build your email list, kind of at the last minute, and just kind of get all your ducks in a row. Supply chain consideration, should be, talked about, where, if you're placing that Black Friday order, you're probably placing that order in April or May to make sure you have it in time. So making sure that supply chain is in alignment with what products that you're going to bet on. And of course that plays into your ad strategy. Okay. Like what prospecting campaigns are we going to be running? Okay. We're going to be focused on this legging and this flannel and this colorway and the shoes and blah, 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 blah. So they can make sure we're prepared, even with the website, making sure it's merchandised appropriately. So I think we really start thinking about it probably August 1. But there's underlying things we're doing at all times that prepare for that moment. We always launch ours on Wednesday of Black Friday week at 3:00. I know everyone kind of, let's start it on November 1st. And
that's really specific.
Yeah.
Wednesday,
because here's why for us. This is just my, Mal and I came up with this like a few years ago. It's like, a lot of people get off early that day before Thanksgiving, because work is usually, if you're not in our business, is pretty lax that day. And all right, it's lunchtime, like everyone go home, and then they're in that holiday vibe and they're starting to think about shopping. So that's why we drop it at Wednesday at 3. And we do a 2-hour VIP window, and we usually have a free product that they can get during that 2-hour window. So there's an incentive to purchase. This year it was a free jogger. So we ordered 2,500 joggers. That was a limited edition colorway. And if, during the VIP window, while supplies last, you got an $80 jogger with your purchase over a certain, order value. So, that's something we've done. So then, when you build that VIP list, I think we had about 35,000 to 36,000 people on the list to get that 2-hour head start. So your first 2 hours are just craziness, because everyone wants that free jogger, and they want to, they want to shop while the items are still in stock and get their order quicker, and all these benefits of shopping early before the craziness that Thursday and Friday starts. So, so much goes into it. Obviously, email and SMS strategy is huge. If you're not just blasting your people during those 5 or 6 days, you should be. That is not a time to show restraint on email and SMS. People should be getting 2-3 emails a day, a couple texts a day. You're going to get some unsubscribes, but you got to realize these people are getting so much stuff in their inbox that you have to stay current. So they might have missed the 10 a.m. email, but if they're getting another one at 3:00 and they happen to be on email, you got them, right? So we're very aggressive with that. And then we even do a win back after Black Friday and Cyber Monday ends. And this was the first time we've actually done a digital win back. Usually we do a direct mail win back, where on Wednesday morning of the following week, because we usually extend it through Tuesday, we look at all the customer activity and we send out a direct mailer to like whoever's left on the list that didn't convert based on certain criteria. And that has done really well in the direct mail. And we usually would target people that are not subscribers to email or SMS, because we realize we didn't reach them. So let's send them a last chance offer that they'll get in a few days, and we'll give them 7 days to use like a unique code for the same discount that we offer on Black Friday. So we've always done that. This year we added a digital component to that because I was like, well, hey, why don't we do a win back or a last chance via email and SMS? My marketing manager was like, well, we've never done that. And it's basically free. So we did that. We waited until Friday because we wanted the dust to settle, because we had just been blasting them with emails through Tuesday. We did it on Friday and it ran 3 days, 72 hours where, hey, from now until Sunday, you get 30% off, just like what you missed. And of course, we excluded people that had converted. And that alone did $100,000. And we, just from 2 emails, right? So we've learned a lot. There's a lot of tactics that go into it, but I think, the preparation really starts very early on in the year. And then particularly when you get into September and October, you might not think you're in Black Friday, but that should be top of mind. And I know some people probably don't start prepping for like a week before. If you're doing that, you are doing it all wrong and you're not maximizing the moment at all. It's the biggest moment of the year. The conversion's insane. Everyone's shopping. You have to make that a milestone moment in your marketing calendar.
Let me see if I got it right. When you said that in October, you go heavy on prospecting, what do you mean? That you do a big increase on the ad spend, but running things without any discount whatsoever until the Wednesday before Black Friday?
Yeah. And the good thing is we'll typically have a couple collection launches in there too. So we're promoting, we always launch what we call it our campfire collection. It's like flannels and jeans and like jackets. It's kind of for that colder weather. It's always a very popular collection for us. So that helps that we have a non-discounted like product moment that everyone gets fired up for. So we acquire a bunch of customers that way. And then this year on November 1st, we actually had a major shoe launch. So we launched 2 new shoe colorways that we blew the roof off of that. And then we had our Veterans Day campaign for 4 days where we were doing the big give back promotion. So we had 3 significant moments in our marketing calendar that, were not discount moments that acquired, I went on Fox News to promote the Veterans Day campaign. On that day alone, we acquired 8,500 customers for free. You know what I mean? So imagine acquiring 8,500 customers that you didn't pay a dime for a week and a half before your biggest moment of the year, right? In a way where it's a brand loyalty moment because they're shopping for you because they know you're paying off veteran medical bills.
Yeah.
So it's not like a cheap, we're running a flash sale, come buy these leggings. Like that's a very cheap customer. This was like, these people are going out of their way to type in bornprimitive.com. It's a direct, or Googling it, of course, and converting. And then 2 weeks later, we're hitting them with the biggest discount of the year. So I haven't looked at the numbers yet, but I'm going to study that cohort of people that we acquired during that 96-hour window to see what the conversion rate was 2 weeks later during Black Friday and beyond. Like I think it's important to study LTV of certain cohorts of people so you can better understand their behavior, right? So if you're running a flash sale, the LTV of a new customer acquired during a 72-hour flash sale where you're trying to sell a legging for $30 that's normally $80 is going to be wildly different than the customer that during a prospecting campaign bought the leggings for $80. And you have to take that into account into your strategy. So the long-term math problem math formula is in your favor. All right.
I'm glad I'm not alone. I've been recently sounding like a broken record because we created a mini guide, posted everywhere, talked on the podcast about how to turn, or why brands should turn deal handlers for holiday shoppers, into loyal customers. So is that a thing for you? What do you do to, for example, let's say this Black Friday, Cyber Monday period is over. What do you do with that cohort from now on, looking into 2025?
Well, there's definitely going to be a lower quality customer if you average it. For all the new customers you acquired, for us, it's like a 6-day sale. That's definitely going to be a less valuable customer. But I think for us having a cadence where there's new things to kind of re-engage them. So we launched a new shoe colorway in 2 days, right? We launched a new leggings and sports bra colorway collection last week. So we try to hit in December, we don't want to run out of gas and say, all right, like the year's over. We still want to have a few arrows in our quiver to build excitement from the cohort of people that just bought, they just got their order. Hopefully they're like, man, this is really good stuff. And then boom, here's the Chrome collection. And boom, here's the new Savage One colorway. Get it by Christmas. that's a way to re-engage those people. And then in January, we'll have new collections as well.
How often do you launch products, man? You launch new
well,
products
yeah, I know it's a little nuts. And I will say, word of caution on that, particularly those in apparel, like don't go too crazy, because like you want to allow those moments to live as a campaign and have their moment in the spotlight. And if you're launching a collection and then like 4 days later, you're launching something new, it makes it appear less important when you do launch something because you're doing it all the time. So I will offer a little bit of caution, but for us, because we have shoes now, that's an easy way to just do like one new colorway. It's not this crazy big campaign, but we know when we do that, a lot of people are going to come and convert immediately because they really like the shoes. So I think it's just, it comes down to having, a good cadence of marketing events planned. Again, you're still going to have a lower value customer. If you acquire a new customer during Black Friday, that's just going to be how it is no matter what. But I think there's some things you can do to make them more valuable than the average. And that's kind of how we've approached it too.
Exactly. So one of the last questions I have for you is, how do you plan 2025, or how do you plan typically New Year and specifically 2025, given that the last few years were, to say the least, unique? They were unique.
Yeah.
2024, the elections, like it was a crazy year, inflation, recession, things are not, people are not, buying many things at the same time. How do you plan this year? Do you do by quarter? Do you plan the whole year? Do you plan product launches? What's your focus right now?
Yeah, we have pretty much, we have the whole year planned out for next year already. And we have to, because we're in apparel, right? So like we're designing our campfire collection 2025, which will be late October of next year, like now. Of course, spring is done, summer's done, back to school, like all those ones are way done, a while ago. So that forces us to build the marketing calendar. And now I would hope most people would have their marketing calendar built out for next year already. If you don't, that's okay, because in the early years we didn't either. We didn't even have a marketing calendar. We just winged it, right? It was like not the way to do it, but we try to have a promotion once a quarter where like typically it's a 20% off site-wide sale. And we, one a quarter, we'll have one of those because that is a good opportunity. While we don't want to overly discount, it can be very profitable still, and it gets people re-engaged. So that's how we generally approach it. And then you sprinkle in the product launches. All right. So now that overlay has now been added. And then you add brand moments, right? So for us, it was like the 80th anniversary of D-Day. Now that also coincided with a unique shoe that went with that, right? So that was a brand and product moment. And then, all right, we're putting Veterans Day in. That's a major moment for us, a brand building moment where we do a major give back. And we kind of overlay all of those at kind of the main things. And then obviously there's little stuff in between. Maybe it's just one product. It's a new style of jogger. Like that's not going to be a campaign, but maybe that's a 48-hour sprint where there's a couple emails and, some social media content around it. Those will get added last to kind of fill it up. And it fills up real quick. But start with the big stuff and work backwards. And then be prepared to make adjustments. If there's a supply chain issue, you need to be able to say, all right, we need to push that 2 weeks, right? Okay, what are we subbing in? Okay, that thing that was in 2 weeks is now because that can go at any time. And that's inevitable. So the team just has to be prepared to be flexible. But if you can get that established, and then you can look at it, of course, quarterly. All right, what's the priorities in Q1? I think it's important to make sure the team is focused on the main activations in that quarter and they don't get distracted, and have stray voltage that pulls them away from the core tasks.
And this is really valuable. For me, for the audience, I believe too. And I really enjoyed the conversation. I could keep going for hours, but I want to be respectful with your time. Before we go, though, I wanted to ask you, is there anyone specific that you would like to give a shout out to? Someone who helped you along the way, a former mentor, former boss, probably, a partner that is helping you grow as well. So do you have anyone to give a shout out to?
Yes. I think for me, by far, the biggest mentor, he's a business partner, of course, but I think a mentor first, at least that's what I consider him, and also a friend. But it's Taylor Holiday. He runs Common Thread Collective, which is, we call it CTC, but they're an agency out in California. And we've been with them for like 6 years now. And ironically, before we got with them, we didn't even do digital advertising. We doubled our business every year the first 5 years without doing any advertising, which is crazy. And I was like, hey, I kind of want to try these Facebook ads. Like, I feel like that could work for us. So I contacted them, a long time ago. And I remember they said, hey, you have to spend a minimum of 10 grand a month. That's like the minimum. And I was like, wow, that's wild. That to me sounded like a crazy amount of money. And of course, once we got into that ecosystem, we realized how beneficial a good paid strategy can be. And we've been, in lockstep ever since. And the thing about Taylor is, as we know, this landscape evolves so fast. One day you think you got it figured out, and then the next day it's iOS 14 and, everything kind of goes up in the air. He is constantly on the front end of the evolution of the space that we play in. And he's typically, I would say, 3 or 4 months, maybe even more ahead of that evolution. So he's feeding that information back to his team. And of course, engaging with CEOs and owners about this and how that affects our strategy moving forward. And they just have been absolutely instrumental in our success. And so much of our success has been on the digital landscape and paid advertising. We spend a lot of money on that platform, but we deploy it in a way now that is so effective. And, there's milestones and there's daily goals, and we know profitability and, based on product category, what we're willing to accept for a ROAS, because we know gross margin, but also LTV associated with those categories. So it's become way more complicated and sophisticated, but in a very good way. So I got to give him a shout out. I can look you in the eye and say, we would be nowhere near where we are as a company if it weren't for Taylor Holiday and Common Thread Collective. And it's a partnership that I've really enjoyed, and I've learned so much from my side as well.
Yeah, I follow Taylor as well on LinkedIn and X, and the guy is one of the few marketers I know that cares about finances too, numbers, and knows so much about the market and so much about the behind the scenes of a brand, not only, the ROAS and the tactical things of meta ads. So yeah, I share without knowing him as you do, but from what I know him on social, I think it's a guy that clearly knows his stuff. So Bear, before you go, could you please tell the audience where to learn more about you and your company?
So I'm just at Bear Handlon on Instagram, nothing fancy there. And then, we're at Born Primitive on all the social channels, and our website is bornprimitive.com. Yeah, check us out. We have, we started with fitness apparel, but we have all kinds of apparel now, from lifestyle to outdoor to tactical footwear. We have a lot of stuff. So if you're in the need for some gear, check us out. But I appreciate you having me on, and it's good to talk about this type of stuff for once, because I feel like the last 2 months I've been talking about the Veterans Day stuff and different topics, but I love to nerd out. We could talk about this stuff all day long. And I'm actually going on Taylor's podcast next, so it'll be the same stuff we're talking through and debriefing a really good year for us on his podcast. So I appreciate you having me on, and hopefully the viewers and listeners got something from it.
Yeah, I did get a lot of value. Thanks for being here on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
All right. Have a good day.
This episode was brought to you by BSR Digital. We help DTC brands grow through paid ads and email marketing campaigns. If you'd like us to help your business grow, head on over to bsrdigital.com and schedule a call with us.